Thank you for joining us this morning. And also thank you to Ryan and Ross for absolutely setting up this talk. It's about the role of API product manager, where we see it's come from, where we think it's going. As for myself, I am based in the UK. If you are trying to work out, if you're English, why my accent sounds a bit Australian, I've lived there for most of my adult professional career. I'm back in the UK. My apologies if my English is very quick. So stop. This is quite a strategic conversation, and I do use Australian slang sometimes as well. So I'm a director of a consulting business based out of the UK, APIs First. I'm co-founder with Mariuka over there at the API Collective, and I also volunteer the leadership of our Women in APIs initiative. What I wanted to share with you today is some observations that we've made on how API product management has got to where it is today. It's based on product management, because the theme of this conference is all about not just looking back, but also looking forward. So we're going to make a couple of projections about what we think is coming up in this increasingly difficult industry. And again, thank you, Ryan, for your comment. How many people did you say you've met? 800, 400, and you found about 5 great API product managers for an organization that really gets API product management. Think about all the people who don't yet get it. The reason it's important is that more and more organizations are relying on APIs to realize their business strategies, whether they are a technology company or the space that I work in for 30 years, which is helping large organizations manage change. They call it transformation now. Some of us could say 30 years ago it was just change, but they're relying on APIs. In order to be good at APIs, they need to be good at API products. Good API products need good people looking after them. One of the challenges that we have is that everybody's idea about what an API product manager is kind of blurred. And I think many of you will even have a different idea about what product management might be in your organization or your clients' organizations. Or your own teams. So I'm assuming today that you all know why APIs matter, that you know why APIs products are important, and that people are going to continue to invest in them, and that they're going to continue to evolve. If you're here to understand why APIs matter, just give me a ring separately. But what we are going to talk about is why the role is important, and why we think the role is evolving, and what we think it might end up looking like. It's a bit crystal ball at this stage. So this study goes back to Gartner report. It's about 4 years old now, and it's quite small. This was some views from some Canadian CIOs about what were the most in-demand IT roles that they saw coming up. And I don't think there would be any surprise about the top 3: cyber security expertise, UX, design, cloud architecture were disciplines that they saw as important. 4th was API product management, or the API product manager role. But the key thing is the grey stripe at the bottom. The CIOs at the highest performing companies were the ones that put API product manager as at the 42%. So the lower performing organizations, CIOs, didn't yet realize this was something that was going to be significant. Those that were more far-reaching. If you want some greater evidence, more recent evidence as to why this is important, Mark O'Neill yesterday, if you listened to his keynote, shared this with us, which is Gartner's updated report on the top challenges for large organizations in achieving their API strategies. They were asked, of a number of things. The one at the top was they were missing key roles, such as their API product manager. 59% and nearly a third of the people who replied put it as the number one challenge to them achieving their API strategy. So this is a skill in shortage. If you want an even more current update, last night in the cab in Uber on the way home, there was a McKinsey article came through this week. 6 reasons why every company is a software company. The second one that they put was the investment in empowered product managers. Now, they were talking beyond APIs, but it was all in the context of software, and I really recommend, I'll post this on my LinkedIn, after this session, but I strongly recommend you have a read because there's, if you're into justifying why API product management roles are important. How are we seeing this playing out? Job descriptions. I'm sure Ryan and team could give us probably some great examples, but the sorts of things that API product manager roles sound like they're looking for include product strategy and roadmap, building revenue customer satisfaction goals, product-based vision, recommendations around where that's going. All of these things are very commercial. They are not what some organizations think product manager roles might be. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion with things like SAFe definition, the SAFe methodology, if you're familiar with that. Other ideas about what product management might look like, which clearly is not actually where it's going. However, there's very little consistency. We'll just go back a little bit in history about, and Audrey was helping us support with some of this. The backdrop of how APIs have contributed to the evolution of what we know as the tech sector. It's great fun when you go and find the old logos. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with how in the early days, APIs were there as the start of powering some of the API commerce discussions as we got into technologies, as social media started expanding and using APIs to be able to propagate huge amounts of information. Amazon Web Services then changed the game by being able to offer infrastructure as code. And so we moved through these eras of then the whole kind of mobile era, the focus on connectivity. You could argue that maybe what are some of the next eras? Is it going to be about empowerment? Is it going to be about ethical responsibility with tech? These have all given backdrops to how APIs, and then increasingly as product stripes changed the game with their developer experience. And at the same time, product management has been also evolving. And it goes all the way back to the 1930s. I would credit strongly Martin Erickson's article on this. He pulls together a great history of product. And it came about in the 1930s that it was Procter & Gamble started getting small teams of 3 or 4 people together who could work on a particular brand or a particular product with different disciplines, and they wanted to be able to go and understand the customer and design things together. And they did it through a memo. But meanwhile, in manufacturing, after the Second World War, people started moving, particularly looking at overseas to Japan, and organizations that were rethinking how to deliver and make things quickly and efficiently, and they started introducing lean processes. Meanwhile, in the engineering sector, building increasingly skyscrapers and larger construction projects, they started getting really good at the discipline of managing scope and managing budgets and time. And you had services industries, banking, financial services, getting really good at understanding process and starting to learn to automate that. Now, these disciplines, if you like, in the era of product, they kind of got a little bit blurred until the technology sector came on the scene at the start of this century. And they took people from Procter & Gamble, then they were Hewlett-Packard, then they, in Silicon Valley, started being the early people in a lot of the tech sector there. And they brought in the whole customer UX data thing that we now know as that whole kind of set of disciplines. They came out of product from effectively a marketing background. They then also used the Agile Lean, so the Agile Manifesto we're all very familiar with. That was launched at the start of the century as well. They were then bringing those practices into what had become very slow, sluggish IT software development practices to be able to start thinking about lean. So These converged and changed, if you like, the project world. Meanwhile, we also had a lot of digitization going on in those industries that came from more of a process background. So you can see that as then, in the last 10 years, we started getting into people talking about platforms, ecosystems, tech products. API products have come about as effectively, their DNA, if you like, goes back to all of this. That is one of the problems that we see as to why everybody has a different idea about what an API product manager is. Because it depends on which of these industries on the left you have lived in. Does this familiar? Does it make sense? Am I speaking too fast? Good. So if we want to go and look at what this means for API products, let's go back a step. So I'm also leaning on some great research from Will Lawrence and Sachin Reiki about 4 different ways that products have been thought of in the tech industry. So we double-clicked to us, and this is 4 different types of product management. And all of these brands will be very familiar to those of you, I would imagine, in the industry. But we're going to now talk about what they mean in the API sense. So there are product managers who have an engineering-driven discipline in product. We're not talking API product yet, we're talking technology product. If they're engineering-driven, they're really good at applying tech knowledge for high impact. If they're data-driven, they're all about using data to understand and design really great products. If they're design-driven, they're all about making their tech product really usable and really easy. They're really thinking and getting into the heart of, they're applying CX principles to their tech. And if they're sales-driven, they're numbers people. They're looking at commerciality. So how might those look if you were to apply them in an API sense? What they are not is, so a sales-driven API product manager is not there to APIify today's product. Do you see what I mean? So it's not like we've got a current financial services product that we sell and we want to just make it into an API. They're not about just saying, what does our customer next need? Let's give them this one thing at, or expanding their use. What we've done, again Audrey supported us with this. This is an example of a completely cold view of a API portal that appears to us to have been designed with a sales-driven approach to the API products behind that. I know this sounds a little bit complex, but what we are seeing for organizations like that is they are looking to drive their API products commercially. So they're looking to really present their APIs as a way that they're going to be able to generate revenue from those. So there's a lot about pricing and consumption is easy to see. There's a lot about the marketing as a sales channel. That's how it's been positioned. Oh, okay, that's all right, thank you. It's either that or you end up with light all over your face. The key thing is for people in that discipline is they've got to be really commercial. Got to be close to the business, they've got to understand, and they've got to be able to influence in lots of ways. So I think a lot of people we in the market, they want to monetize and get revenue from their API products, but they really need to think about how they're going to have all of the right sales discipline behind that and how they're going to present it that way. You'll find these people, they will be hanging out, you'll find them with their business peers because they're very commercial or they are actually part of business units. That's where they're going to be living, that's where you're going to find them. For API products that are overplayed in this space, there is a risk that they just become a customer solution. You see what I mean? You spend too much time on maybe having one offer for one particular customer, and it becomes too complicated. going to move through quickly. Engineering driven is more what we see in very large organizations that are going through transformation. They are often starting from a basis of APIs are the way for them to simplify their architecture, modularize into letter blocks, their legacy monoliths, and you will find these in many different organizations. The API product manager in that space is not there to lead the tech simplification. They're there to champion the APIs that will be consumed internally. Mark O'Neill talked a lot about this yesterday in the Gartner conversation. The engineering-driven API product manager, so the second of our subspecies, is there to realize a lot of value. They're simplifying. And you're going to be seeing them focusing on these sorts of things. These are engineering, so it's all about making sure that the APIs are developed as products that can be used and consumed by other developers quickly, easily, and securely. You're going to see these people getting very excited about new technology. They're probably here. Of course, the problem with people who are engineering driven is there's a risk that they might get overexcited by the next shiny new toy and forget about the responsibility to deliver. But we have a data-driven subspecies, so we're 3 out of 4 now. These are the people who are really looking at APIs and the way they present their APIs and the way those APIs are managed from a data lens. So it's all about the performance and the analytics and the consumption of the APIs. This is a portal that we chose as an example of one that to us presents as having been data-driven. It may not be, and if the people are here that wrote it, apologies, but that is how we interpret it. We believe that you are showing us a very data-driven API product thinking in your mindset. The people who are data-driven, they don't own the data products in an organization. What they are, and they're not about unlocking value. That's the business side of the API, of the digital product, sorry. The data-driven API product manager is all about monitoring, synthesizing, analytics of the performance of that API. I'm sure in organizations like Fiserv with the sorts of volumes of transactions you were talking about just now, you would expect to have API product management discipline in this space. So the last one's design-driven, which is probably the one that people have probably the most familiarity with. This is an example of, because this is the one I think that many people relate to, how do I design for a great developer experience around my API? So this is the people who are you're going to find the people doing this, hanging out also places like here. They're trying to make sure that they can get value from the future API consumer wants and needs. They're going to be talking a lot with each other about how to get community input to the API product. One of the things that they need to be careful of is making sure that they don't over-design, that they actually can help the organization get to decisions about launching the APIs and getting them managed. So while the use of APIs has exploded, and we could argue, by the way, there's a bit of timing around how some of these capabilities have been coming through, these different 4 themes. But suffice to say, we think that going ahead, there will be more rather than fewer subspecies. So we've shown you 4, which we think of as an example. We think it's a little bit like the medical profession. So, doctors 150 years ago, they kind of, this was, surgery was like there was one surgeon. If you think now, you can be a upper gastrointestinal surgery and you only deal on like one part of the gut or hands and elbows, that is it. So we think that APIs will become more specialized API product discipline. So hopefully the 5 things that you want might actually be lots of different types. And the organizations that understand and set up API product management well, and they set up the success expectations on those API product managers, they're going to be the winners. I think they may have already been. And there are a bunch of things that they need to sort out. They need to get the funding right. They need to really understand what that role's about. They've certainly got to make sure they don't confuse people between project and product. We do see that a lot. Maybe this is something that we as a community could be working on. And the last thing is a little bit, perhaps, maybe contentious. We believe API product managers need to be in-house. Organizations need to build this capability, and it's going to be hard because it's a growing specialism. And so they're going to need to get really clever and creative about how to, and the reason why it has to be in-house, by the way, is these people are close to the business strategy. And you can't outsource that. If you want to have people who are really fluent in the business, then understand how to be able to interact, and some of the more technical skills, or the things that are going to change, those are teachable. But we believe that it's really important to find people who can understand, deal with, maybe you call it the soft skills, but it's all the communication, influence, collaboration stuff that's required. That is perhaps the magic that you talked about, the special, got to build that. That's where we think things are going. So thank you. I think I have overrun. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Claire. Can you make one question?
One question, apparently.
Do we have just one quick question?
Drop the mic. There's a bit of a joke about that.
Mic drop. Okay.
Ryan.
You mentioned about growing talent instead of just hiring. Have you seen any examples of companies who've done that really well in terms of growing talent for APIs?
I think that I'd probably say yes, because I'm not going to cite examples, but I think the organizations that get it, like why is API product management important, they are now realizing that they need to, but the thing that they're struggling with, and actually where we help organizations, is often what does good look like, and what sorts of support and coaching. And we're seeing that people can acquire a lot of the knowledge and skills through, it can be things like these sorts of events, but it's actually, they need a lot of coaching along the way. And they need to be able to create a role. One of the problems we can see at the moment, so actually dealing with it yesterday, is that the current organisation structures don't easily allow you to create an API product role. So you don't want to end up with these kind of like orphaned special people, but by the same token, you need to be able to build something that can fit. So we're seeing that people are having to they apply a lot of kind of diversity inclusion on this too, which is like, well, okay, the person's not got everything we want. What are the things they don't have? Can we support those by other people? Can we train them? Can we give them some extra external coaching, guidance, so that help them learn along the way? Or do we just try and, because you're not going to find, there aren't going to be enough people in the market basically to find what you want, and you're obviously seeing it. So you've got to kind of go, well, okay, they can do 60% of it, or maybe if we've got some people who are great, can they be our leaders and our mentors of this community of practice, so that we can get more people operating more broadly? Does it become like distinguished engineers versus, maybe there's an API distinguished product manager? Well, that's a good idea. Let's have one of those. So you heard it here first. You came up with it first. So I don't have a precise answer, but I think it's going to be big. All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Claire.